Good morning, listener. Good morning, viewer. I'm glad to see that you've had the good sense to abandon everything else. Your children may not be washed, your breakfast may not be made, the beds are unmade upstairs, but you've come to see me and Pat. Pat, aren't these people of wonderful, good judgment?
Absolutely. Highly intelligent, obviously
How,
well read.
where else would you find them, eh? Where else would you
Yeah,
find them?
absolutely.
And they
Yeah.
come down throne. How long have we been doing this, Pat? Just crossed my mind. How long have we been doing this? Or as the
For,
song says, how long has this been going on?
what song? Is that Marvin Gaye? I think it
Something
is.
like that.
Anyway, we've been in it for about 4 years now, haven't we? About
At
4 years.
least,
4 years.
Pat, I think
Well,
it was at near the
didn't
beginning
we
of
started
COVID.
just be, we just started. I think you rang me up one day and said COVID's coming down the track and whatever. Let's do something to
Huh.
stop our brains atrophying or whatever the word is. So our brains are still atrophying, but we're doing it
I
anyway.
was going to say, but did it work?
I'm not sure.
No, it's good. It's good to talk. I think there should be more of it, and more. I always have believed, Pat, that whether it's in small groups or two people like ourselves, or in large groups, there's a great appetite among people for discussing subjects seriously. Like I go into the Belfast City Library during the week on a Friday, and after I've done my stuff with you, and we read a short story that the woman has run off copies of, and then we read a linking poem. And the degree to which people are really interested in looking at the poem and thinking, what does that mean? And wonder why they use that word, or was that an anticlimax in the story? It's just terrific. I think if there was more forums like that, people wouldn't just be talking about the fucking weather or, did I say a bad word there?
You don't know.
Talking about the weather
I'm
or
shocked.
talking about
Yeah,
different things. Incidentally, that word is becoming very common now. I'm getting
yeah,
podcasts from the States, and they're quite bright guys, and they will use the word fuck, use it, toss it in. And I know Joe Brawley does it all the time. So I remember George Orwell predicting way back in the 1950s in an article that just as the word bloody had entered the English language after a struggle because it was seen as a terrible thing, or say damn, oh, that was always just a D in the dash. He
yeah,
expressed the belief that the F word would become everyday, and that's what it is.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, you remember Gone with the Wind? Sure, there was the censor because Rhett Butler says, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." So that was caused mayhem in America. It was lowering the standards and all that sort of stuff.
uh,
Jesus,
uh,
when you consider what came afterwards, it's unbelievable.
yeah.
But Jude, has everything sort of changed? I think wait, Jude, I did several creative writing courses, and I was reading about them. There were a couple of American educationalists, academics. I don't remember exactly their names, but anyway, what they said was very interesting. They said a lot of people want to join creative writing classes because they feel the need to talk and to share. And writing in a way is almost sort of innate. It's something you want to do a lot of time
Hmm.
because what's that word? Cathartic.
Mm,
Sometimes writing things makes things clear in your head. It helps you
absolutely.
deal with mental health issues because you get it out there and it's out of your system.
You said it in one part. That's my experience of writing exactly. That by writing down something, I know when I used to be in the days when the BBC still didn't spit when they thought of me. Uh, I would say, I want you to come in and talk about this. I would sit down at the computer and I'd type up stuff. I wouldn't use it, but
Yeah,
it helped me to get my thoughts straight. And if I didn't do that,
yeah,
then my thoughts wouldn't be straight.
yeah.
And likewise, that thing about cathartic, I think that's terribly important. Um,
Mm.
Nearly everybody should be given some way of, unloading pressures. Something happens to you, somebody puts you down or does something
Yeah,
nasty. Instead of cursing them or attacking them, if you can put those into words. I
yeah,
used to do that kind of thing in letters in the old days when people wrote letters,
yeah,
and I do it to some extent in emails now, but not to the same
yeah.
extent. It's
No,
great. It's a blessing. It's a wonderful thing. A final point on writing. I think writing is magic, particularly because all that
yeah,
writing is are wee squiggles on a page. And
yeah,
you take somebody like Shakespeare. 300, many hundreds of years later, you open
Yeah.
the book and the words jump up into life again.
Joe Bucky. Uh,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
uh,
Bless. Isn't it great to be intelligent, Pat? What? And good taste.
don't know. That passed me by.
Okay, let's talk about the world and the state of the world. And you feel we should be starting at the global level, and
Yeah.
talking about what's happening in Ukraine and with our good friend Donald Trump. Um,
Yeah.
so what would you say about that? Are you happy with the way things are
No,
going?
there's somebody on to me the other day, in a casual conversation where they said, like, why do we bother about, things that are happening on the international stage, like Trump and so on, and why do we get so engaged on social media about it? This directly affects us big time. And anybody that thinks what Trump's doing and what's happening in Ukraine doesn't affect us, of course it does. Today, the European leaders are all scrambling to Paris because Donald Trump has basically said he is going to do a deal with Russia in regard to Ukraine and cut
Hmm.
out the middleman, namely Ukraine. Now, I think Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, which is basically the Minister for Foreign Affairs, he has sort of rode back a bit in that, but so on. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is saying no deal without us, and so on. But on top of that, the Europeans, apparently Starmer has already written an article in the Daily Telegraph having a go at what the US is proposing, which is for him is unbelievable. He's basically saying America has no right to say Ukraine cannot join NATO, has no right to sideline Europe, etc., etc., etc. So, Jude, we're living in turbulent times, and basically they're talking now about a European army. That the
Aye.
only way that we can defend ourselves if America pulls the plug on being the security guard for Europe, that Europe will have to provide its own army. Now that raises massive questions for Ireland about our neutrality, about sending troops, and all the rest of it. But and my final point, Jude, here's the thing: Russia is a danger, no matter what way you look at it and what way you say they had a case for going into Ukraine, which they, by the way, they did have. But if I was in Moldova and Estonia and some of those wee small countries, Finland, you know,
You're
the
frozen.
Russians have already gone into Ukraine and seized, but roughly a fifth of the country. So some of it, the richest parts of Ukraine, and I
Hmm.
don't see Putin giving that back. And there's all sorts of implications of that.
Hmm.
By the way, the final point, the final point is some of the stuff that and that part of Ukraine has got really, really, really rare minerals, really valuable stuff. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be any sort of peace thing. It's going to be very interesting about the money as well.
Well, why weren't my first question would be why? How come this has just popped up? This thing about rare minerals and highly valuable under the soil and so on. Now, I never heard that until the last week, roughly. And yet, this war in
Yeah,
Ukraine has been going on for 2 years or 3 years.
yeah.
So I suspect that there are wheels within wheels. Maybe that's what it's all about. Maybe it's not got to do with the right of countries to have sovereignty over their own territory. Maybe it's got to do with what's underneath the territory that's known as the Ukraine. The second thing is this, Pat. I understand what you're saying about the US saying that they'll do a deal with Putin over the heads of the Ukrainians. But for God's sake, the Americans were doing a deal, so to speak, with Ukraine. They were maintaining Ukraine at a time when Ukraine couldn't have survived on their own. They were
Mm.
pumping weapons into them. So this notion of Ukraine and Russia making a peace deal, let's get real. The guys that are doing the fighting, maybe at arm's length, are the US and well, I was going to say USSR, but Russia. I know people don't like thinking about that, but it is a fact. Those are the two main players. And if the US withdrew its support, then that's a very logical thing to say. Would Europe, should the EU weigh in its place? I'll tell you something, Pat. You're saying that all these small countries, I would like to see if that's the case. Because we were told, they swore up and down and over and round about Vietnam, that there would be a domino effect. That was central to American foreign policy. All these countries would just all go communist. Look at Vietnam itself now. It's not even communist, really. Well, a long way from communist. So let's not take the word of these states who say this is going to happen or that's going to happen. I suspect with the Ukraine, not that I want to see them overridden, but that we're fighting the Second World War at a distance of about 60 years. And that's a habit people have. They say, that happened then, so this is going to happen now. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Finally, I am glad about one thing with Putin or with Trump, and that is he says there's an awful lot of people being killed. And we were never told about that. The numbers were coming up for Gaza, at least, but they weren't coming up. You didn't get numbers for number of Russians killed or the numbers of Ukrainians killed. And if somebody puts a stop to that, I'll thank God for them.
Yeah, Jude, but the only thing in fairness to Trump, if he gets a peace deal, fine. But
Hmm.
Jude, let's get this clear: it has to be an honourable peace deal, and not something done over the head of Ukraine. A couple of things. Putin has one of the things you have to worry about Putin is he does what he says. He says Ukraine is not a separate state; that it's part of Russian territory.
Hmm.
He also, as he says, he's on the record. Remember those rambling press conferences he gives once a
Hmm.
year that go on for 3 or 4 hours?
Yeah.
He's sitting on a stage, and it's a sort of. He said he wants to bring Russia back to basically, to use your term, the USSR days. In
Hmm.
other words, that the breaking down of the old USSR was a terrible mistake, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Jude, you mentioned too about this thing about the precious minerals. Jude, there's titanium, uranium, lithium, and all these other things. The Americans are saying for their support for the war. This is Donald Trump's and Marco Rubio apparently met with Zelensky last. They said they will take control of 50% of the rare earth minerals that are in Ukraine.
Okay.
50%, and apparently they're worth 500 billion.
Okay. Supposing, Pat, supposing Trump and Putin did a deal over Ukraine because of these rare minerals,
Yeah.
and they're doing it for financial reasons or whatever, and I suspect that's at the back of it, and they split them, and maybe they give Ukraine some of them, but that's done and the war is ended. Would you be happy enough with that if the Russians?
No, not no. I think when you start rewarding people for aggression, and so on, um, you're sort of going down a slippery slope. The
You see,
Americans,
people could say that about the
everybody's
IRA,
saying
Pat.
Trump.
Pat,
But everybody's saying Trump is a peacemaker. By that at all, I think Trump is out to make money,
aye,
and
right,
he's
aye,
threatened Greenland. He's threatened to take
yeah.
force the Panama Canal. He's threatened, he's helped the Israelis big time.
Mm,
He said, "Oh, the gates of hell would be loosened, etc., etc."
mm.
Dude, I don't see him as a peacemaker. The evidence is not there. He mightn't like wars, but the reason he doesn't like wars, he's quite big into violence on a personal level. The reason he doesn't like wars is because it's not good for his business.
I know this is lowering the tone of our chat, Pat, but I heard this
Yeah,
in the podcast the other day. You know the way Trump was saying he wants to buy Greenland, and
yeah,
the way he's changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico. And if you go to his office now, there's this big chart which says the Gulf of America. Uh, there was a Southern Republican senator and a Trump fan who is proposing that America should take over or buy Greenland, and they should rename it Red, White, and Blue Land. I can't
Jesus,
believe
Jude, like every lunatic, every Looney Tune that it seems to be unleashed by Trump. And then we had what do you call him, Musk's 4-year-old daughter, our son, standing picking his nose. Anyway, the bottom line of it all, Jude, is today there's going to be a big meeting of all the European
Yeah,
leaders. They're all scrambling now to sort of say, like, because Trump is basically saying, Europe, you're on your own, forget about,
yeah.
and so on. And it's going to be very interesting, Jude, what comes out of it all.
Well, what would you favor, Pat? Would you favor, like, if Trump pulls out for one reason or another, would you favor an EU army going in there and replacing or supporting Zelensky's army?
No, Jude, but I don't think. here's the point.
I say yes,
I
no.
don't No, Jude, I don't favor a EU army, but I don't fancy either Trump or Putin getting his own way.
I,
You know, like
I'm with you
uh,
there.
yeah, so there has to be some sort of solution. Now, I presume Putin at this stage, Jude, if half the stuff that I'm reading is correct, his economy is in deep shit.
Mm.
There are billions sanctioned on banks, because of the sanctions that he would like to get. Russia has become isolated on the sporting field. I think after about 3 years, they've suffered considerable losses in terms of men, armaments, and all the rest.
Mm-hmm.
I would think he's open for a peace deal, but he's going to play tough. So,
Mm-hmm.
but there has to be negotiations of some kind. Just,
Mm-hmm.
to answer your question, I am pretty certain there will be a European army.
Oh God, I really hope there isn't. I really hope there is. Well, in fact, I'm sure there is one now, or the bones of one, or the skeleton of one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the very thought, I really think somebody, I don't know who the woman was, but she was a TD and she gave a speech and was going the rounds about Ireland's neutrality and how it needed to be defended. And I think that is absolutely bang on. There's so many bloody wars over the years, and Ireland's urged to join it and shamed if they don't. I think Ireland just should keep out of those. Well, for a start, there's something ironic about a country which is missing the top northeastern corner, getting hot and bothered and pitching into wars hundreds of thousands of miles away for the sake of sovereign control.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, Jude, I think I think the world as we know it, like America is basically, Trump has basically said to old allies, bollocks, you're on your own. So
yeah.
he's abandoned nearly all the old traditional allies. He has also cozied up to Putin. Russia used to be the great Satan as far as American politicians were concerned.
Mhm.
He's cozying up to him. He's bringing Russia back in from the cold. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, met with Rubio, I think, the other day. It's the first meeting in about 3 years since the invasion of Ukraine. So everything's sort of changing. In other words, what he seems to be doing is saying that my old enemy is now my friend, and my old friends are now my enemy.
Well, I must say, given the fact that both Russia and the USSR and the US have nuclear weapons, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief when I hear that they're getting together and, for whatever reason, getting together and talking and cozying up to one another. It's very difficult to know, but again, the acid test for anybody who says that the US should, if the US abandons Ukraine, that the EU shouldn't, and the EU should be prepared to put in military support. Anybody who says that, they should be prepared to put their son or their daughter in the front line, right?
I agree with that totally. Yeah.
It's a grim equation, but I mean, if you believe really that that's that important, that life is worth expending on it, then you do your bit. I think
Yeah.
you'd find there be very few armies, or a lot less armies
Absolutely.
than there is at present. Okay, let's go to something maybe. Oh yeah, this one about. Did you hear Gavin Robinson's speech by any chance?
I heard a bit of it.
Yeah, I didn't hear it, but I just saw it in the Irish news. I think it was
Yeah.
PSNI. Headline is PSNI must move beyond woke quotation marks
Yeah.
woke quota of 50-50 recruitment, says DUP leader. And Gavin Robinson says that he has been contacted by a mother whose son will not get a training place because he is male, white, heterosexual, and a Protestant. And he talks about, Gavin Robinson talks about craze of woke quotas. What do you think?
Yeah, apparently there's 3,500, or was it 2,500? No, 3,500 applications for the PSNI.
Yeah.
Less than 30, I think it was about 27% were from the Catholic community. So,
Yeah.
in other words, Jude, what is that? 73% of the applications for the PSNI are from the Protestant Unionist community. Here's the
Uh-huh.
thing, Jude. Traditionally, the occupied six counties, the police were the preserve and the reserve of the Unionist community. They were seen as their police force, not our police force. The Catholics are now in a majority of the population in the north, according to the last census. And the Catholic population is the one that is growing quickest. Yet, when you come to policing, it's very much a minority position. In other words, the unionists are still in control of the police service,
Mm.
and that, no matter what way you come at it, is a seriously bad look. And the other thing as well, I think we mentioned this the last day, Jude, unless is positive discrimination, this is a divided society. And the only way you can police a divided society is if everybody has faith in the police. And
Mm.
right now, as we said the last day, the Catholic community, I think it might be generational, it might be inherited, it might even be genetic, pick whatever you want. But the Catholic community has very good reason over the years not to trust the police.
Hmm. Well, now put yourself, Pat, for a moment in the shoes of, say, this mother that wrote to Gavin Robinson, and she's complaining her
Well,
son
Jude,
isn't
by the way,
getting
just
in.
to interrupt you, I wonder is she mythical? It sounded, a wee bit
All
fake
right.
to me, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, now, I would never doubt the word of a fine man like Calvin Robinson.
Uh,
But
uh,
let's assume either way, even he did make it up,
yeah,
or even it's just a theoretical. But I mean, if this woman, just suppose you were that
she's
woman,
done.
and you
Yeah,
thought your son, the moon and stars and sun shone out of his nether parts, and
yeah,
actually he was a really good candidate for a recruitment, and he didn't
yeah,
get a place because of this
yeah.
50-50 thing. How would you feel?
Okay, fair point.
Oh,
But
would you?
the
Yeah,
cat,
how would you feel? You'd feel bad, wouldn't you?
yeah, I feel pissed off and annoyed, of course I would. But here's the point:
Yeah.
the
But do you
Catholic
think that's worth
community.
having?
No, Jude, I don't. I think the bigger picture is the fact that the Catholic community, academically, have achieved far more than the Unionist community, and that's
Yeah.
fact. It isn't my
Yes, yes,
sectarian opinion,
absolutely.
and so on. So there's plenty of Catholics who have a lot of ability, who could be very good policemen,
Hmm.
are women who simply don't join because there's an ethos in the police that's very British. That the Queen or the King, all the serving, and all the symbols of the police service. The police service in Northern Ireland is much, much more political than the one would be in a London Metropolitan Police. And there's a lot of British symbolism in the
Yeah, oh
PSNI.
yeah. But I wonder, I mean, would you see that, say, a daughter or a son of yours, if they were going for their PSNI and they didn't get in because of this quota, would you say, well, I wish to God I had, but I'll sacrifice that because for the common good, we want to get a balanced police force. Would you, or would you be saying, to hell with that? I want people to be recruited and how good they are. And why isn't my son being recruited then? On the face of it,
Could
it
be,
does seem a reasonable argument, doesn't it?
of course, it's a reasonable argument, but it's not the main argument. The main argument by a mile, Jude, is this is a divided society. And if 72 or 73% of the police are coming from the traditional unionist Protestant background, and there's no change in that, the policing of the society will always be in dispute.
Why do you think Gavin Robinson used this, talked about, this, they can't get a place because he's male, white, heterosexual, and a Protestant? And why did he talk about the craze of woke quotas and
Yeah.
so on? Why do you think he did that?
Doing that's the old bullshit. It's woke because it's the right thing. Jude, woke is about the whole idea of fairness and about accepting of difference and so on. In America, a lot of people, when they are trying to get black people into the police force, they were condemning it and said because of positive discrimination. Yet if you went to Harlem and you were a white guy and you were arresting a lot of people, it didn't exactly help community relations, did it?
Mhm.
Whereas if you got black people who were impartially and fairly imposing a law in that community, I think you would get a much more reciprocal relationship with that community.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, Pat. I think context free. I mean, if you have no
Yeah,
context like we have here,
yeah,
then of course the best person, the best man, best woman, that makes sense. Uh, and that's what Gavin Robinson's calling for. But saying, just take for example, supposing I slap my wife around and then
yeah,
drive off with her in a car, you might
mm,
say, what a bastard that guy is. What a wife beater. Horrible. No way can that be explained.
yeah, yeah,
But if I knew that half an hour later a gang was coming to kill the both of us,
yeah.
would you still see me as being such a bad person, taking my wife, forcing her into a car and driving off? Of course you wouldn't, because the context changes everything. And that's
Yeah.
exactly the situation in the north of Ireland. Of
Yeah.
course, on the face of it, people should get jobs because of the best person, regardless of their sex or anything else. But it just happens that we have a society where that's got a terrible history. The RUC had a shocking history, and the B-men, geez, the B-men's ridiculous. My mother used to
Yeah.
talk about the B-men, and she used to talk about every half around the country was getting a job with the
Yeah.
B specialists, and there's some truth in that. So once you said in the context, then that changes everything. And the fact of the matter is, and you've said it earlier, right now the PSNI is failing in its primary job, which is to reassure the community, everybody in the community, that it's on their side. And something needs to be done about that. We
Yeah.
started off with 50-50. They should, it was down to 27. They should go back to the 50-50.
Yeah, Jude, I remember reading somewhere in the early 60s, the RUC was 91% Protestant and
Yeah.
Unionist. Now, Jude, tell me, is that a fair representation and a divided society? Is that the way, Jude, until policing and faith in the institutions and the Catholic community, Jude, what do you think brought about all the troubles and the outbreak? It was because not the perception, the reality of a police service that was bigoted and sectarian. And they were, by the way, let's get that on the record. It's I know. And during the Troubles, the RUC, the UDR were clearly aligned with royalism and paramilitary. The number of policemen who leaked documents and leaked the guns and leaked everything to the. Now, they were honourable people, but I'm on the general side. The,
Mm.
the evidence of collusion has been proven time again.
Yeah, I am amazed. Actually, I see this as Gavin Robinson throwing red meat to his backwoods men.
And that's what it's about,
Uh,
Jude. Of course it
but
is.
but that's a mistake. He's made a serious mistake.
Yeah.
I really can't. I mean, you talk about taking into account the context. Doesn't he know that there's a context in terms of the population here? The fact that, as you said, that now there is a people from a Catholic background form the majority. Doesn't he see that?
Yeah.
Doesn't he see that they're throwing the red meat like that, woke craziness, is going to alienate the Catholic/nationalist population even further? So,
Yeah.
in a way, he's doing the fight for nationalism and Republicans rather than
Yeah.
defending
But,
unionists.
but as well as that, Jude, he's contradicting the Chief Constable, John Boucher, who said he is concerned about the low numbers of Catholics applying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the strange. I don't get it. Okay, listen. Let's move on to something a wee bit later, and we're running out of time already. My God, time flies when you're having fun, Pat, doesn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Um, were you watching the BAFTA awards last night by any chance?
Yeah, I was indeed. Yeah.
I watched part of it. I didn't. I didn't. Did you see Kneecap? I didn't see Kneecap being awarded.
I saw there was a sort of a thing on, I think it was Newsline or whatever it is beforehand,
Hmm.
kneecap going in, but they didn't win anything, Duke.
I thought they did. I thought.
Not to my.
Well,
They won.
I
They won.
nearly said
They
that
won
because
something earlier on. Was it best new film or something earlier on? But I don't think they won anything major last night.
did they not? Oh,
I'm
maybe I
open to
got that
correction.
wrong. I certainly didn't see them, but then I wasn't watching it from the beginning. And
Yeah.
then I saw in the paper something about Kneecap having been given some award. I assumed they got it BAFTA. Anyway, um, did you enjoy it, Pat? Did you like it? Is there anything about these
Dude,
ceremonies?
it's sort of chewing gum for the eyes, that sort of stuff. You're not paying a whole lot of attention. Like Rosie, my dear missus, she went and saw Conclave. She said it was very, very good.
Yeah.
And what's the Brutalist?
Uh,
Apparently, it's a very good film, but it goes on for 3.5 hours. Jesus,
hmm.
dude. I don't know if I could. My backside would be sore by the time 3.5 hours would be over,
Yeah, it was
and
good
so
enough,
on.
Pat. It
But
was
anyway,
good enough.
say again.
I say if it was good enough. It's just a convention, 2 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
A really,
Yeah.
really
Well,
good
what,
one.
what was the last film? It was about 3 hours. Was Gone with the Wind, wasn't it?
That's right. And there used to be these really long ones, and there was an interval in between, so people
Yeah,
could get out
yeah,
and have a pee or whatever.
yeah.
Anyway, what about the thing generally? Do you find it, the reward for artistic endeavor and applaud that? I mean, some
Yeah,
terrific actors there and directors and so
yeah.
on.
By the way, how under God does RALPH become Rafe? But
Look,
so anyway, Rafe Fiennes was the star of the
Brave.
Conclave,
Yeah.
and I am going second hand here because my wife actually saw it in the cinema
Yeah.
there a
Yeah.
couple of weeks
Yeah.
back, and she said it was a brilliant film, and it won did it won Best Picture last night? I think it did.
It was.
Uh,
Yes.
uh, yeah, and so on. So, and then the Brutalist. Brutalist, by the way, is apparently about a Hungarian modernist architect
Hmm.
who goes to America after the Second World War, and struggles there and so on. And it's basically a story of immigration, as I understand it.
Yeah. I find it very interesting the way that what's going on in the world seeps into these movies. Um,
Yeah.
like the Vatican thriller is sort of a timeless thing anyway, but there was this synodal process. I'm not even sure what it means, but within the Catholic Church, and we all remember Vatican II, where all the
Mm.
cardinals came in and so on, and try to refresh the Catholic Church, and I think failed miserably, to be honest with you. But I, I think that as I was watching the little clips from it, I could see why it would be a very good movie. Leave aside even the acting and the plot and so on. It's because it's, if you like, it's Catholicism's royal family. They're
Absolutely.
dressed up in this finery and wonderful
Mhm.
colors, and then there's these meetings and there's processions and there's tensions between groups within it.
Now, there's all this ritual and protocol and all that
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
yeah.
That gets people, Jude, for some reason.
You see a lot of Catholics sort of feel, well, we're just as good, even better. Like
Yeah,
we had a big thing whenever Queen Elizabeth II died, but what about when John Paul II died? Oh, we were
yeah.
even better.
Yeah, but
Uh,
Jude, remember the wee Bishop Farron used to run around with
oh, I
a
can't
big
forget him.
car
Uh,
with a
Chauffeur.
chauffeur. And I said to somebody one time, Bishop Gill used to drive himself, but I remember said to somebody, what was all that about? And they said Farron was showing the other people that the Catholic Church had as much power as it was symbolic.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the Farron lived, and the bishops lived in Derry, lived for a long time in the palace, the bishop's
Yeah,
palace.
yeah.
And there was a pride taken, and you'll find this down to the present day. I remember somebody saying about a church or a chapel, you want to call it that, in Belfast, that the car park was bulging with BMWs and Audis and Mercedes, and saying, well,
Mm.
how does that match with Christianity? And another guy said, "No, not at all. Isn't it great to see our people getting on?" You know?
Yeah.
So you tend automatically to side with them. I was saying you could describe it as a Catholic Downton, Downton
Yeah,
Abbey.
but
And
I remember years ago, I did a very simple thing. We were, and I mean, about 50 years ago, I was only a young fella, and I remember being out with my dad. And he lived in this place called near Dromahal, and he
yeah,
said, and I looked over, and there was this big house. It was before big houses were common in Ireland.
yeah.
And this is who's that? He says, he looked at it. My dad was a traditional Irish Catholic. He says, "Oh, that's the parish priest's house." He says, "Isn't that an amazing house?" He says, "For one person."
No, that's right. That's right. That's right. I know priests that actually have said, younger priests who have, when they became a PP, they moved into this house and they were embarrassed. They said, this is the house that people have built for us. I wish to God it was smaller and less conspicuous,
Yeah,
but they've built it. That's what they want.
yeah,
And
yeah.
most Catholics said, sort of went along with that and thought it was a good thing.
Mm.
Um, I'm not sure that it was the best movie. I'm going to go to one of the movies nominated. Comes to me very highly recommended, and I'm thinking of going to it this afternoon. And my missus isn't going to come; she doesn't want to bother. Is A Complete Unknown? Does that ring a
Yeah,
bell?
about Bob Dylan and
Uh,
Joan Baez. Yeah, yeah.
well, a couple of people who went to that said it was bloody marvelous, and
My missus my missus goes to the cinema
yeah,
fairly regular, and she says that's very, very good.
I wonder how would she rate it alongside Conclave? Um,
That I can't answer,
because I've no real
she like
desire to
she's
see Conclave.
she's a big fan of Dylan and Joan Baez, so
Uh,
maybe she's a
uh,
bit
uh,
biased. Yeah.
well, I think I might go, and I probably regret it, but I think I might go to it in any case. Okay, what about crime near home? And what time is it? 2 minutes, very quick, Pat. The Gardaí apparently in the last year have seized 2,150 knives, and among the ones that weren't seized involved the killing of a guy on Grafton Street. Was it last night? I think it was last night.
No, it was
The night
about
before,
two
the
nights
early
ago.
hours of the
Yeah, yeah,
morning.
yeah.
So did that come to as a sort of a shock to you or sort of horrible? Certainly the way RTE brought it to the public's attention was this is shocking that the guy was
Yeah.
killed in Grafton Street. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a thing on social media, of a guy. Apparently, there was a around a nightclub, and whatever happened, it spilled out onto the street.
Yeah.
And there's actually video of this guy going over and back, and he's with a big knife. Jim O'Callaghan, who's now the Minister for Justice, says it's
Yeah.
disgusting, and he says it's unacceptable. But
Mhm.
Jude, by the way, I live in the area of Northwest. The biggest number of it's up by something like 70% knife. So knife's becoming an issue.
Knives are number one, very readily available. I gather you can get them
Yeah,
sent off through Amazon. And secondly, they're lethal weapons. They're
yeah,
just as lethal as a gun. Well, maybe
absolutely.
not quite as lethal, but they're near enough. I mean,
But if you use one, Jude, on a
exactly.
human
If you
being, it's
stab
as lethal as
somebody,
a gun.
the
Yeah, yeah,
chances of that person surviving are low. And you see,
yeah,
the terrible thing is, look at all those knives. What are these guys doing with these knives? They're bringing them with them, and if necessary, they'll kill people. And in
yeah.
behind all that, you have the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, which everybody acknowledges are still, maybe not fighting as much with each other, but there's the spectre of them. It doesn't say much for the policing system in the south of Ireland, does it?
No, Jude, and they're going to have a look at that. They've cut back policing big time, and as well as that, the numbers joining the police force have gone down.
Uh,
But the whole thing, Jude, there are parts of Dublin are definitely not safe anymore.
I know the solution. A united
Uh,
Ireland, united police forces, and squeeze out these mad bastards. Okay? That's it.
Absolutely, couldn't
Start of
agree
the world
more.
again. Okay, Pat.
On that
Yes.
note, Jude,